Everybody, hello. Things are looking good. Thanks for joining. Just getting things set up here. Everybody, thanks for joining. We're here at Schrunk Plaza.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
About to get started here.
Free Palestine! 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 Free Palestine!
Thank you, everybody. Let's get started. Before we get started here today, it's important that we make an acknowledgement of where we are. We're here on the Multnomah and Clackamas Chinookan people's land. The stolen land of the Multnomah and Clackamas Chinookan people, specifically right here. These people have stewarded the land from time immemorial. And we must acknowledge that we are here settled on stolen land. We must take that message to every podium and in every table discussion to remember, as Palestinians, we will always stand with you in your struggle for decolonization. We thank you for allowing us to be here. It is easy to believe anything when you ignore history and the voices of the oppressed. It is easy to accept the unacceptable, the atrocious, when you dehumanize the victims of atrocity. It is easy to claim you did not see what is plainly in broad daylight when you actively uplift and support the mechanisms that place the veil before your eyes. That ignoring, that dehumanizing, that veil is for you to live easily while our people are ripped from our lands and livelihoods. That ignoring, that dehumanizing, that veil makes it easy for you to actually participate and support the uprooting of our people. It has always been about one thing in the US, to aid in imperialism everywhere, because it is easier than not. We're here today, as we have always been as Palestinians in the diaspora, here to make it difficult for you to remain silent. Difficult to go back to your ignoring and your claims of ignorance. Al-Nakba, an Arabic word that means the catastrophe, has been memorialized in Palestinian hearts and minds to describe the events that occurred between 1947 and 1949 in order to create the Zionist occupation state of Israel, which declared its colonialist Occupation I sovereignty in April of 1948. Between 1947 and 1949, upwards of 800,000 Palestinians were forcefully displaced, fled for their lives, lost their homes, their land, their livelihoods, their dreams, their future dreams, as the fledgling occupation state violently sieged and occupied over 400 villages across Palestine. At that time, Palestinians found themselves landless, houseless, and without agency, seeking refuge in the still unoccupied parts of Palestine, in Jordan, in Syria, and other parts of the Arab world. They walked with their possessions, holding and supporting their elders up, carrying their children, many recently widowed due to the massacres, seeking refuge wherever it may be. They found tent camps, temporary accommodations, and for many, only the never-ending road. The fate of 1948 Palestinians, as we call them, was in the hands of others, and their trajectories and displacement was diverse. For many with hands full of the few heirlooms they might have been lucky enough to grab, especially keys to their homes, which they harbored a hope to return to. This was the last time that they saw their beloved land. Them and their future descendants would never see Palestine. Us Palestinians commemorate and mourn the losses, but we also resist the illegitimate narrative of the occupier today. We do so every year, Nakba Day. Today you will hear stories of the Nakba and what that means to Palestinians here in your city, what they and their families experience in relation to the Nakba, but also how they continue to experience it. I want to express something before our speakers tell you their stories. In actuality, the Nakba did not begin in 1948, and it never, ever ended. I mentioned history just a moment ago, and its importance not to ignore. I won't go into too much detail now because the information is there. It's in plain sight. It's easy to find. The CSPP actually exists for the exact reason, and if you live in this city, you have a literal reading library and a learning center to pursue that labor, which is yours to do, and we will happily support you to do that. But what I will say is that the 1947 to 1949 mass grab of Palestinian land and the establishment of the militarized occupation state was only made possible due to over 50 years of European colonialist planning and enabling beforehand. Planning and enabling, like the British evangelists calling Palestine a land without people as early as 1841. Despite the complex and thriving Palestinian people and their relationship to the land. Planning and enabling like the British military surveying of Jerusalem and its surrounds in 1867, and the Palestine Exploration Fund, which pumped London wealth into colonialist aspirations and further surveying. Planning and enabling like the appearance for the first time of USA involvement as early as 1881 with the Blackstone Memorial and clear support for Western influence in Palestine, signed by hundreds of financially and politically powerful USA citizens and presented to President Benjamin Harrison. Planning and enabling, like the Zionist Congress assemblies that begun as early as 1897 and eyed Palestine as well as Uganda for the future site of a Zionist state. Assemblies that were hosted in European countries despite the violent and belligerent aspirations of the Viennese spokesperson Theodor Herzl. And the monumental planning by the British and the underhanded inheritance of Palestine through the Sykes-Picot Treaty in 1916 and the audacity of the Balfour Declaration in 1917 that declared Palestine open to the creation of an occupation state. A declaration agreed upon in Western meeting rooms. A declaration through which Palestinians lost their homeland without any say in the matter, literally while they were asleep. In the 30 years following the occupation, the displacement, the ethnic cleansing came in waves, constantly and increasingly. And since 1948, for 73 years, it has continued to do so. It's important to realize that the Nakba, the very process by which we are discriminated against, dispossessed, displaced, brutalized, and murdered, is the same in every event that Palestinians experience in occupied Palestine at the hands of the occupation state. And in every event, we Palestinians resist, we fight for liberation, we struggle to decolonize, and persist in our indigenous existence. We resist events like the 1967 Naksa, or we resist within events like the First Intifada of 87 through 93, or in the Second Intifada, and every instance of incomparable violence towards Gaza. Gaza, who has been blockaded since June of 2007, Gaza, where an absolute military strangulation and an inhumane siege by air, land, and sea has caused thousands of innocent casualties and is the cornerstone of punishing the Palestinian people for resistance and self-defense. Now, I ask you to listen to the stories. Listen to the stories and the voices of Palestinian people. Free, free Palestine!
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 Our first speaker.
Hello everyone, my name is Jarrah. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm a Palestinian who has grown up in Portland and a member of Hurriyah Collective. An anti-imperialist Muslim collective who are organizing around Islamophobia, militarism, state-sanctioned violence, and the alarming rise of fascism in the US and around the world. I want to tell you today about my family stories, about the village they lived in Palestine and the generational impact of settler colonialism. My family comes from farmers in Jaffa. The village of Al-Abbasiyya was covered in rows of olive trees and orange groves. In Al-Abbasiyya, land was central to life, as it was all over Palestine. The land nurtured us, fed us, sheltered us, clothed us. We cared for it and it cared for us. In Palestinian villages, we lived collectively. Your neighbor was someone to borrow a cup of sugar from, a babysitter, someone to have tea with, a source of protection. My great-grandfather was the mayor of the village during the Nakba. From what my grandmother has told me, he loved his job. He was the person people went to with problems, big or small. And it wasn't that his position had dictative authority or final say on all matters, but we were able to utilize everyone's strengths and knew everyone's needs so we could all survive and thrive together. They protected each other from the settler and state violence caused by Zionist settler colonialism that was invading from the east. Racist Zionist mobs attacked the village over and over again to scare the inhabitants into leaving. There were car bombings, grenades thrown into houses, and Zionist mobs broke into homes to kill and displace the families who lived there. The horror. The same horrors of 48 are now being recorded and shared by the descendants of 48 and 67 refugees. The Nakba is ongoing and the U.S. is funding it. In May of 1948, Al-Abbasiyya was ethnically cleansed of Palestinians. All that is left of the village today after settlers destroyed it is part of the village mosque and a Nabi Huda's shrine. The village was taken over for and by settlers to make it their traveling through routes easier between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. My great-grandfather was responsible for making sure everyone in the village was able to escape, and they headed east towards safety. Everyone had what they could carry in a wagon or in arms as they walked from Jaffa to the Jordanian border. All the village people thought they would return in 2 weeks. That's what my grandmother always told me. They held the keys, they had everything, they barely took anything with them because they knew they were going back. No one thought they would be locked out of their homes or forced to live in exile as refugees in Jordan for 73 years. Not only were they starting anew, but Zarqa, Jordan was a much bigger city than Al-Abbasiyya was, and my family and the other people from the village had to adapt to an entirely new way of living in the world and in relation to the land. My grandmother once told me that my great-grandfather in Jordan, just a few months after settlers displaced them, realized everything was gone. He wasn't mayor anymore. He had the skills of a farmer and a relationship with the land that he mourned. This wasn't a small village where everyone knew each other and survived together. He had the keys to his home in Palestine, but he couldn't go inside. In 1970, the Jordanian government became an active resistor against our growing liberation movement. They kidnapped and jailed all the Palestinian men in Jordan and kept the women and children in houses. My grandpa told me there would be hundreds of them locked up together with no access to food or water or clean bathrooms to make sure none of the Palestinian men were able to fight back. Outside of those houses and jails, the Jordanian government was bombing to weed out weapons in residential buildings. My maternal grandmother was nearly killed twice by Jordanian soldiers during this time. Once a Jordanian soldier violently grabbed all the Palestinian women and children, rounded them up outside, and pointed his weapon at him. The only reason he didn't shoot was because another soldier called out his name and asked for help. The second time she almost died was when she had to escape the house with others in the middle of the night to get to safety. And a Jordanian soldier found her escaping and put a gun to her back as he questioned who she was and what she was doing. She had to lie and say she was Jordanian, that her husband was also a soldier. She tells that story honestly with a lot of laughs because she had actually gone back to the house to grab her jewelry because she was a newlywed bride and she did not want that to go to waste, her new gold. The Nakba is ongoing because we know that the Zionist state does not just want to displace us from our lands, but to ethnically cleanse our people. This is why my great-grandparents and grandparents were forcibly removed from their homes and villages, and why my grandparents were subjected to so much fear and state violence in Jordan. My mom remembers when you saw older Palestinians from 48 in Jordan, everyone was in mourning and there was a numbness. Nakba is ongoing because we have been repeatedly displaced from every place we might have found a refuge and have been left with no homes at all. In Jordan, my mother remembers the fear of being caught, and the pain of being without a home was present in every living room, classroom, and masjid. My mom used to tell me that living right next to the Zionist state, she often went to bed thinking, are they going to come for us again? They had been in Jordan for decades, where there is a striking pain from knowing you can't go home because an occupying army and their henchmen will not let you. When I went to Jordan and learned more about my people's history, what she lived through became clear to me. My grandparents were physically present, but their hearts and minds were in Palestine. That was also the first time that I knew our erasure was not going to be as easy as our oppressors had hoped. A goal of Zionism is fragmentation. fragmentation of unity and pride in our country. While the U.S., Israel, and its accomplices conduct a media blackout on the protests and uprisings happening in occupied Palestine and globally in solidarity, our scattered siblings in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon have been running to the Palestinian border, returning 73 years later to a home we might have never seen, but we know we belong to. They are fighting and organizing against one of the most well-funded militaries and settler states in the world. The Zionist state uses Palestinians in Gaza as a captive population to be massacred in retaliation of the colonized and the oppressed rising up. The Nakba is ongoing because my parents grew up in Jordan, missing a home they've never seen. The Nakba is ongoing because this settler state has thrown its full weight and support behind it. This country does not want us, and nor do we want it. That isn't an uncommon feeling among Palestinians, to be nomads globally and for your roots to have never taken root in foreign soil. People are choosing genocide and apartheid over people's lives. People are choosing to empower the U.S. war machine, and it all comes from the same roots of white supremacy. Zionism is white supremacy, and white supremacy creates the greed and abhorrence that values profit over the rights of people and land. I'm sharing with you stories of what my family went through during Nakba because we must take action against Zionism and settler colonial violence. We must heed the calls made by the Palestinian civil society to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. We must organize around unequivocal support for Palestinian struggle and liberation and resistance in all its entirety. We must go school by school, city by city, and build a strong transnational movement. As Hassan Kanafani said, imperialism has laid its body over the world, the head in Eastern Asia, the heart in the Middle East, and its arteries reaching Africa and Latin America. Wherever you strike it, you damage it, and you serve the world revolution. When colonized and oppressed people rise up to take their lands back, the parallels between our collective struggles become explicit. From Palestine to Colombia, from Turtle Island to the Philippines, from India to Afghanistan, we know that the settler state does not keep us safe. We will not stay. We will fight for our collective liberation, and we will win! Inshallah, today will be the last day we commemorate Nakba like this. I hope next year I can sit with my parents and my grandmother, with all my cousins and my aunts and my uncles, and be with each other, finally home in Palestine. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free!
Free Palestine! 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 Free Palestine!
Follow this chant. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Today we are finally seeing what in some ways is a collective waking up. And it's important to thank where thanks due. The struggle for Black liberation has always been the leading edge of increasing global awareness against injustices everywhere. It is no coincidence that the calls for justice over the past year in the wake of police brutality in this illegitimate country has increased people's awareness about the Palestinian cause. And we stand with the struggle for Black liberation always 100% as Palestinians. Your phones bring you images and videos of the latest bombings in Gaza. They bring you images and videos of the brutality at the Al-Aqsa holy site in Jerusalem, the occupied capital of Palestine. Your phones bring you videos of the resistance to forced displacement in Sheikh Jarrah and the uprisings all over Palestine. Will you continue to ignore history and the voices of the oppressed? Will you continue to accept the unacceptable and dehumanize the victims of atrocity? Will you continue to claim you did not see what is there in plain sight? I think the veil has been lifted, in part, and now it's back to the question of ease. We're gonna have a next speaker now. Zohair, are you ready to go, or someone else? Zohair, here we go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zohair Salim. I lived here for about 35 years in around Portland area. Thank you very much for showing up. I'm so proud of you. So proud of the young people. I want to share just some history to where our disaster started from the very beginning, and I'm going to run through it really quickly. But I want to know how many people know what the Balfour Promise. Can you raise your hand if you know what that is? Yeah, there's about half of the crowds here. That's where our disaster in 1917, November 2nd, actually, England decided to just give the Palestinian land to somebody else once they won the World War I. And that's really where the problem started. We had a lot of Jewish people in Palestine from day one. There was no difference, Jewish or Christians or Muslim. Everybody lives in the land, everybody farmed, did their thing. And then you just got some people, and then just grew from 9% to like 37% in less than 10 years. And then it becomes a problem. 1948, I'm not that old, but 1948, where they declared Israel as their own land and their own country, and we went into the Nakba. So the Nakba started in 1917. It continues to go on. Okay, sorry. This whole thing started in 1917, and generation after generation in 1948. So my parents were living in Beersheba, which is in the south of Palestine, and that is where my grandfather got kicked out in 1948. He immigrated to Gaza, and then my father had to leave Gaza in 1967 just because there's another Nakba that came in and they took the territory. And then I had to go to Saudi Arabia to live because I got kicked out. And guess what? Saudi Arabia wasn't any better. And I got also sent in here, so I live my life. So as a Palestinian, and I'm sure all of you identify with this, every generation gets kicked out of where they ever put their roots in, and then the Palestinians, we never get back. So any person that declares they're Jewish, they can go back to Israel anytime. As a matter of fact, they can take somebody's house. However, if you're a Palestinian and you leave there, there's no going back for you. And that is really where apartheid comes in. It is really people have the power to take other people's rights and other people's right to live in their place and prosper. And it continues to go on and on and on. And I don't know if there is an end to it, but the only way you can end it is with this group, with this resistance, with you telling people we are not accepting it. We have human rights, and we go in America about fighting for human rights. But it comes to the people of Palestine, and we stop. We somehow stop that because we always for the human rights, but we see the Palestinian kids and we just look at them for living and go. I'm not talking about this group, but the general population, and we just accept that they're defending themselves. I keep hearing this thing constantly about Israel is defending itself. but never Israel had actually invoked this whole thing. That isn't in the news. It's always about defending itself. The Palestinians don't have the right to defend themselves. They're just shooting things and you know, throwing rocks, and we're the troublemakers, and Israel is just defending itself. And that is not the truth. The truth is they are not defending themselves. They're the oppressors. I don't want to take you too long, but I have fourth generation. This is here, my next generation, and I'm trying to teach her one thing. Palestine will always be there. Will always be there. She will carry the flag. She will be one of those people that free Palestine. And her children. We will continue going all the time until that land is back in our hand and we can live like we lived for a long, long time. Thank you very much. Thank you for showing up.
Repeat after this one. From Palestine to Philippines, stop the U.S. war machine. From Palestine to Philippines, stop the U.S. war machine. Before we go on to the next speaker, there was over 400 villages that were depopulated in 1947 to 1949, and I wish that we had the time to say every single one of those villages' names. But I'm gonna say the 28 villages that constituted around the Akke subdivision lost 47,000 people were depopulated from that area. That was 28 villages. And in the Beersheba, in the south, 19 villages totaling 91,700 people. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Our next speaker is a newly arrived Palestinian to our city. Please welcome Sada.
Hi everyone. I didn't prepare anything to say because every time I went to go write something, I sobbed. And I don't do that often. I wanted to tell you about my grandfather's story, who can't be here today to tell it. He grew up in a town called Sidna Ali, next to Jaffa. He lived a wonderful childhood where he went to swim during his recess because it was so close to the Mediterranean Sea that he could swim during his recess, which is something unheard of here. The Nakba, what it means to him is taking his family in the middle of the night in 2 doses to go to his aunt's house because the Israelis were about to bomb his house. It means the Israelis bombing his truck on the way to Qalqilia and his hair turning white at the age of 14. He broke his kneecaps, and nearing the end of his life, he was getting worse at walking. Freeing Palestine means to me is going home. A home I've never been able to go, but a home that lives in my heart. See, even talking about it makes me shake because it makes me so angry that I can never visit. At the age of 14, my mom tried to enter Palestine. She was denied the right based on stereotypes. Everybody else in her family was allowed to go in except her, but she was not allowed to. If the Zionist system isn't white supremacy, I don't know what is. It breaks my heart every time I have to go on Instagram and see my people being tortured. It breaks my heart every time I have to go on Instagram and see another child killed.
It makes me want to break into 1,000 pieces when I hear that my people will never be free, but they will. They will prevail, and Palestine will be free! I want to thank everybody for coming today. It makes me so happy to see so many people here today. Thank you.
In the Baysan sub-district, 19,000 people displaced out of 40 villages. And all throughout Gaza, numbering over 60 villages, 80,000 people were displaced. Repeat after this, please. Justice is our demand, no peace on stolen land. Justice is our demand, no peace on stolen land.
Justice is our demand, no peace on stolen land.
I think right now, if we could have Wa'il. Wa'il, if you're ready to speak, please.
My name is Wa'il Al-Asadi, and I want to speak today on behalf of my grandmother, my teta, who's in Syria right now, a refugee. She's 87 years old. And on behalf of my daughter, Zaina, who all these years later is born, she's 1 year old. And my family was from Safad, in the northeast of Palestine. My family, Safad, was surrounded. It was isolated and it was bombed from the outside. My grandparents had to leave on foot. And one of the ways in which they instilled fear in the hearts of people to get them to leave, because people were resisting, because people do not want to leave their home, whether it's 1948 or whether it's 2021, is that they burned down the village next to Safad in full view of everybody in Safad. The Zionist forces at that time to scare everyone to leave as they were bombarding. And my family left. My teta ended up in Syria. My grandfather lost his mother and his sister in the process because of exposure to the elements as they walked on foot, leaving their homes, leaving every single thing behind. And that story doesn't end then, because that generation was dispossessed of their homes, and for those of us who were forced out of Palestine, they were left without documentation, without a home. For my parents and their generation, who grew up in Syria, who grew up in Lebanon, who grew up in Jordan, who grew up around the Middle East and around the world, and were left without a state, without documentation, subject to being removed from wherever they were. My father and my mother had to leave Syria because of my father and their activism in solidarity with Palestine. And for those who have organized here in the United States, their children's children, who have gone on campuses, who've gone to universities, who've said we have to boycott and divest and sanction Israel until it ends its human rights violations of the Palestinian people. The Nakba is ongoing because they call you anti-Semitic if you demand your very basic rights and put you on blacklists. But people will keep on fighting, and thank you to all the organizers who put this event on and focused on history. The focus on history is important because they want to shut that away. They want to say it's a complicated issue. It's not a complicated issue when you ask any Palestinian that is in this arena here about what happened to their family in 1948. They want to say this is simply a legal eviction, but every single Palestinian life in this room puts lie to what that is an eviction. We have a name for years and years and years of evicting people from their homeland. It's called ethnic cleansing, so let's call it by its name. And for those whose memory is only 1 week old, who point to the bombs coming out of Gaza, bombs of a people that are in despair, who are in the largest open prison in the world, we say one thing to them: the people who are under occupation, who have been assaulted and ethnically cleansed for years, have a right to resist. And we know they lie about their worry about violence. Because when we say this country can end things overnight by stopping their billions in weapons and support for Israel, we call that the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. They attack us. And I've been to many demonstrations now for 15 years, and I think there is something different happening today. What's different is not the absolute depravity of the Israeli state's actions. That has continued. Our parents, our grandparents know about that, and we have been to many protests to resist this. But what has changed, it feels like, is the level of resistance of the Palestinian people, who I think are waking up again after years in every single part of the Palestinian population. We are seeing protests in the West Bank, in Gaza, inside of 1948, the Israeli citizens of Palestinians, which is scaring them because they say that Israel is a democracy, but that is putting lies to that. That is showing how big of a lie it is. And I will just end with this. The Palestinians are resisting. People in Baghdad are out. In Iraq, people in Jordan are out in defiance. And people across the United States. And what we do here matters. The United States is the single largest backer for the Israeli state, militarily, economically, morally. And shame on Biden for vetoing that resolution saying that Israel needs to stop. Shame on the Biden administration that the only thing out of their mouths as children are being killed is that Israel has a right to defend itself. But that is not the only voice out there. There are our voices in the streets, and there was Rashida Tlaib, the first Palestinian woman in Congress, who gave a beautiful speech. Not one more penny to the Israeli state until Palestine is free.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! From the river to the sea! From the river to the sea! Palestine will be free! Palestine will be free!
In Haifa,
Excuse me. Thanks.
northwestern subdistrict, 60 villages were depopulated, totaling 120,000 Palestinians. In Hebron, which we say Khalil, 16 villages with 23,000 people depopulated. Repeat after this. Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Long live 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 the Intifada!
Long live the Intifada!
Long live the Intifada!
Long live the Intifada!
Intifada! Intifada!
Intifada!
Intifada!
Intifada!
Intifada!
Intifada! Intifada!
Let's have Jad wanted to say a couple words, please.
Hello, everybody. You know, I didn't prepare anything when I came here. I had only one thing to say. You know, Martin Luther King once said, "A man dies when he refuses to stand up for what is right. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for justice. A man dies when he refuses to stand up for the truth." The United States is supporting Israel because of what? Money, power, and that. But we are here because we're not slaves to the money. We are here because we are people of dignity, and we will stay people of dignity until we die. Thank you.
In Jenin, the Jenin sub-district, 8 villages, 4,000 people. What I haven't mentioned in the past sub-districts that I mentioned to you were the massacres. So I'd like to go back because that's part of what has happened to us. In Bi'r Seba, we underwent one large massacre. In Akka, 8 massacres. In Baysan, 1 massacre. In Gaza, 6 massacres. Haifa, 10 massacres. Khalil, 2 massacres. Yeah, it's on there. We're going down. Next speaker, before we go to the next speaker, let's again say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Please welcome Roba.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to thank you all for coming today. I wrote this speech while I'm in tears, and I hope I can complete it. As of right now, a Palestinian man called Muhammad Hadidi met his 2 months baby, the only survivor for his family that killed an Israeli airstrike, which bombed the family home in a refugee camp in Gaza last night. Muhammad's wife and his 4 kids were killed in the massacre. He saw his wife and his kids in pieces. What sin were they killed for? What sin were they killed for? It was Eid. They were still wearing their Eid's clothes. In 1948 was the Nakba, and today we're living it all over again. Israeli Zionists are acting like Nazis. Come and get me. I'm a Palestinian woman and I'm here. Come and get me. I'm speaking the truth. You are not gonna tell the world what to believe and what not. Stop the crocodile tears. We are Palestinians and that is our land, and we have nothing to lose. We have nothing to lose. We will resist until our last breath. Palestinians, and especially Gaza, doesn't have an army. Does not have an army. Israel is sending an army into Gaza to fight people who literally do not have an army to fight back with. What war is this? This is not war. This is genocide. They wanted us to live in peace, but that's not happening. It all started at the beginning of the holy month Ramadan. Exactly 1 month ago, Israel blocked off access to the Al-Aqsa Mosque for Palestinians and nearby settlers They were supported by the state who were also trying to forcibly steal Palestinians' home in Sheikh Jarrah, as you all know, and as you all saw the videos. Sheikh Jarrah, which is home to 3,000 Palestinians that would make an entire families homeless in a pandemic. So this colonial violence has been happening because both Israel and settlers know that their state allows them to carry weapons and assault Palestinians in their neighborhoods and their own homes, in front of children, women. Let that sink in. Coming into your own home, peacefully, sitting there, and kicking you out, using weapons and guns, terrifying the children, and you don't want us to fight back? What is this?
Israel are terrorists!
Israel is terrorists! The last thing I want to say, there's a million things to say, but this is the last thing I'm gonna end up with. We will do everything to take care of our mosque, to take care of Palestine, to free Palestine. But they come to us while peacefully praying, using steel bullets coated with rubber. They fire tear gas into the mosque, and lastly, throwing white phosphorus. Do you guys know what white phosphorus is? Throwing it in the homes, throwing it at children. It's burning, their faces are burning. It's internationally illegal white phosphorus. Free Palestine.
The 36 villages that make up Jaffa, 123,000 people displaced in 2 massacres. The 6 villages and cities that make up Jenin, 4,000 people displaced in 1 massacre. Remember, this is just in 47 to 1949. Next, we're going to have Dr. Hnedi speak about something that she's working on. Oh, actually, first we have an Arabic statement to be made. Tafadhal Khadija.
Hello everyone. Thank you, Arab or not Arab, Palestinian or not Palestinian, Muslim or non-Muslim. Thank you for coming here and standing up for Palestine. الساكت عن الحق شيطان أخرس. كلنا نعلم أن الاحتلال الإسرائيلي يقوم بقتل المدنيين العزل في فلسطين، يقوم بقصف غزة برا وبحرا وجوا لأنهم غير متواجدين في تلك المحافظات الفلسطينية الأخرى تحت الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. المدنيين يقومون بالدفاع عن نفسهم بالحجارة، يقوم الاحتلال برميهم بالرصاص لأنهم يواجهونهم بالحجارة. أخواني وأخواتي المسلمين، إذا لم تقفوا مع فلسطين بسبب أنها ليست دولتكم، تذكروا أنهم أخوانكم. تذكروا قول الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم: مثل المؤمنين في توادهم وتراحمهم وتعاطفهم مثل الجسد الذي إذا اشتكى منه عضوا تداعى له سائر الجسد بالسهر والحمى.
الإسرائيلي والكثير من القوانين الظالمة بحق الفلسطينيين. قبل انتهاء رمضان بعدة أيام قرر الاحتلال إخراج سكان حي الشيخ جراح من منازلهم التي يملكونها من مئات السنين وإسكان المستوطنين فيها بدلا عنهم. تخيل أن هذا يحدث في منزلك أنت، أن يأتي شخص ويقول لك اخرج، أنا سأسكن في هذا المنزل الآن. نعم، هذا ما يحصل في شيخ جراح. قبل قليل قلت لكم القوانين المفروضة على الفلسطينيين عندما يخرجون الناس من هذه البيوت أين يجب أن يذهبوا؟ يسافروا خارج البلاد؟ ممنوع. يسافرون بين المحافظات؟ ممنوع. ماذا تريدونهم أن يفعلوا؟ في غزة يوجد تقريبا 200 مليون شخص في مساحة أصغر من 150 كيلومتر مربع، ولأنهم لا يستطيعون السفر خارج غزة يحتاجون لمباني كبيرة، مباني سكنية طويلة ليتم استيعاب العدد الكبير في غزة. ماذا يفعل الاحتلال الإسرائيلي الآن؟ يقوم بقصف هذه المباني الكبيرة لقتل أكبر عدد ممكن من الغزاويين. طبعا سيذهب المسعفون لإنقاذهم، من يستطيعون إنقاذهم ويأخذونهم من المشفى. ماذا يفعل الاحتلال الإسرائيلي؟ يقوم بقصف المشافي التي تعالج الجرحى. هذا احتلال قاتل إرهابي يتهم المدنيين العزل بالجرحى بامتلاكهم السلاح. نعم، هذا جزء بسيط جدا مما يعيشه الفلسطينيون. جوجل قامت بمسح اسم فلسطين من خرائط جوجل وتغييره لاسم إسرائيل، وتم مسح محافظة غزة من خريطة إسرائيل. نظام أندرويد الحديث قام بحذف علم فلسطين من الإيموجي. الولايات المتحدة تجدد الجوازات للفلسطينيين ولا يسمح لكتابة اسم فلسطين على جوازهم. يجب أن يكتبوا إسرائيل. فيسبوك وانستغرام يقومون بحذف المنشورات والصفحات والهاشتاجات التي تفضح جرائم الاحتلال. يقومون بتقليل عدد الأشخاص الذي يمكنهم رؤية المنشورات الداعمة للقضية الفلسطينية. يريدون أن يمحوا حقيقة وجود دولة فلسطين ويفرضون على الفلسطينيين التقبل بالاحتلال الإسرائيلي. في الختام أريد أن أختم بعدد الضحايا لهذه الحرب حتى الآن. الإجمالي 140 شهيد، الأطفال 39 شهيد، النساء 22 شهيدة، والمصابين أكثر من 1000 جريح. البارحة تمت إبادة عائلة كاملة لم يبقى منها إلا الأب وطفله الرضيع. البارحة كان هنالك شخص يصور الجرحى والشهداء القادمين للمشفى، انصدم بوجود 2 من إخوانه ضمن الشهداء، لم يعرف ماذا يفعل. صديق لي في غزة قال لي لا تقلقي علي، إذا حدث لي شيء هناك من سيخبرك بذلك. تمت إبادة عوائل كثيرة في غزة في الأيام الماضية. تحدثوا انشروا فضائح الاحتلال. إذا كنتم خايفين من الموت تذكروا أنكم ستموتون على أي حال، هذه هي سنة الحياة. إذا متم بسبب وقوفكم على الحق ورفضكم الظلم ستموتون موتة الشرفاء. إذا متم وأنتم ساكتون على الحق راضين بالظلم على غيركم، هذا يجعلك أنت والظالم في نفس المكان، كأنك أنت من قتلت أيضا. لا تشارك في جرائم الاحتلال عن طريق سكوتك عن الظلم. قد تقول المنشورات والهاشتاجات لا تفيد، لكني أخبرك بأنك خاطئ. هذه هي حرب إلكترونية. إذا كنت غير قادر على المشاركة في الحرب برا فهذه حرب إلكترونية. لا تقول أنك لا تستطيع. هذا أبسط شيء ممكنك أن تقدمه. انقذوا حي جراح، غزة تحت القصف. الآن اقرأوا سورة الفاتحة على أرواح جميع الشهداء.
In the Ramla sub-district that makes up over 70 villages and cities, Ramla and Lid, 100,000 people were displaced, and 10 massacres occurred. In Nazareth, in Nasira, 5 villages, 5 cities, 9,000 people displaced, 1 massacre. Repeat after this, please. From Palestine to Mexico, border walls have to go. From Palestine to Mexico, border walls have got to go. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Dr. Hanadi, please, if you have your statement.
Hello, I'm trying to just recite some lines, actually, to be concise and right to the point. This is going to be the intro of my coming up book. Really, even though our clay is made from our land, they want us to strand. They want to destroy our yesterday, and they still occupy, kill, and bind us today. They hold us accountable for their melancholy, even worse. They take revenge by causing us an ongoing catastrophe. They are changing our demography, our topography. Yes, they plundered our history, time, and place, but we will never surrender our place. Thank you.
In the Jerusalem sub-district that makes up some 70 villages and cities, 98,000 people were displaced and 3 massacres. And in the Safad sub-district, which made up over 60 villages and cities, 60,000 people displaced and 10 massacres. Repeat. From Portland to Gaza, globalize the Intifada. From Portland to Gaza, globalize the Intifada. Free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! We've got a speaker from Jerusalem who would like to speak.
Hi everyone. Well, those who know me will know my name, and those who don't, the only reason I'm not gonna say my name is because my family right now lives in East Jerusalem, and the speaker who spoke in Arabic actually said the speaker who spoke in Arabic said some of the things that I was intending to talk about. I don't have a speech prepared. I just have a few things. I moved here 9 years ago, and the first thing I knew was that the topic of Palestine outside of my door, outside of my home, was a taboo here in the US. And I just want to say that this brings me so much life to see all of you right now. And I also want you to know that each and every single one of you that is posting one single post that is speaking the truth is more important than you can ever imagine. those of you who are following the live feed, those who are following Instagram and who are following what's going on will know that every single person who is right now speaking up, they're not the politicians. They're actually Palestinian and Arab and social media influencers on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube. They are the ones that literally brought this to all of us to hear. So, one of the things that have been happening and that will happen and is happening right now is there's gonna be a huge media blackout. That's already started. Their Instagram is taking down posts. It takes down live feeds as they are coming out. You will literally see them fall like from Instagram. The people who are raising the banner and saying that things are happening. Like, these are the reason you hear and see about what's going on, the videos, all of this started because people reached out to people on social media, and every person in Gaza is literally sacrificing their life to bring you that picture. I cannot. If you're not gonna share, just bear witness. Just go and open that feed and look at what's happening, because I cannot believe that people died and got shot while I was watching them. I cannot believe that the difference between my brother in Jerusalem being dragged out of his car and the person he filmed was a road. That's it. My brother yesterday filmed people attacking a car, and the soldier who looked at him almost threw a grenade at him. He kept and then he filmed a person that was being arrested. Again, that's in my neighborhood. That's literally in my neighborhood. I said that a couple of times before, but one of the main things. Okay, sorry, I'm very nervous. So. I asked a person in the DSA, I'm gonna be sharing with them accounts of people who are on the ground from Sheikh, Jarrah, from Gaza, from Jerusalem, from Haifa, Akka, like everybody that I know, I will be sharing them. Watch, share, like get smarter like we're trying to get smarter. One of the things you can do is if you see a video, save it. Like not only like it and share it, save it before it gets taken down. The word Israel is a flag for Instagram. The word resistance in Arabic. They are literally taking down accounts of the person who started the hashtag Save Sheikh Jarrah. Any post that I post for her will be, you guys will see it as a sensitive content, even if she has a heart in it. That's what's happening. So social media, like the people in Palestine, literally, I'm watching the feeds and they say, this is what's bringing them life. We have no army, we have no police, we have nothing. We have literally the soldiers and the police, having the settlers be the first line so that they don't look back to the media. So, in Yafa, a family got burnt last night. They threw Molotov cocktails in their home. I'm speechless. So please, just share it on your Facebook, share it on Twitter. Keep this alive, because soon enough, because you hear what the governments are saying, you hear what they are doing, nothing. So please, we're alive because y'all are alive with us. Watch, share. And speak up, to speak up. This is the time to speak up for us and for all of humanity.
In the Tiberias sub-district that includes the Galilee, 30,000 people were displaced in 5 massacres. From Iraq to Palestine, occupation is a crime. From Iraq to Palestine, occupation is a crime. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Next speaker, Leila.
This is amazing. This is really, really, truly incredible. For all of us that have been speaking out about Palestine, that have seen our families arrested, murdered, displaced, it's great that people are finally standing up against this injustice. We can't do this alone, so I thank you. I thank you for being here. As you heard, there are parallels between all of our stories. My family is also from El Abbasiyeh, as Hanna also spoke about earlier today. My great-grandfather and my great-grandmother were displaced from their homes. My grandparents were displaced from their homes, the ones that they lived in for hundreds and hundreds of years. They tilled the land for hundreds and hundreds of years. They have had lives and families raised in these lands, and to be illegally evicted and displaced from their homes over and over. My great-grandmother still has the deeds and the keys to her home in El Abbasiyeh, which is now an Israeli town called El Hudiyeh. There are no Palestinians that live there. My great-grandmother cannot return even though she is the legal owner of her home. She has been through 4 major wars. She has lived through occupation, and I pray that in her lifetime, Palestine will be free. I see the devastation of the Nakba every day. I see it in my family living in a refugee camp in Amman. I see it in my grandmother's struggle to survive in a refugee camp in Jalazon near Ramallah. I see it in my family who are no longer afraid of the nightly raids that the Israelis undertake. They throw grenades into the neighbors' houses. They arrest people. And they make fun of me for being afraid when I'm there. They say, "How can you be afraid? This happens every day." That is startling in and of itself. That is a horrifying thing to normalize. That your sons could be arrested, that your house could have grenades thrown into it. The fact that they are normalized to that is what's really, really startling. We are a fragmented group. You see that in Gaza, where they cannot enter or leave because of the Israeli siege. You see that in the West Bank, where they need permits to travel throughout the occupied territories. When my cousin was arrested, my family couldn't go visit him because they couldn't obtain the proper permits. He was arrested for 2 years and they couldn't see him. It's much easier to control us now that we are scattered across the world. There are 7 million Palestinians living in the diaspora. That's 7 million people that are denied the right to return to their homeland. This is all a direct result of the Nakba. This is all a direct result of the illegal establishment of Israel in Palestine. This is the Nakba. Every single bombardment, every single arrest, every single murder and eviction, that is because of Israel's establishment. So where do we go from here? You hear these stories, you see the parallels. I hope that you can ask yourself these questions. How have you all, generalizing here, but how have you all stayed silent for the 73 plus years that the Nakba has been going on? How has Israel and the US been so successful in their campaign to dehumanize Palestinians to the point that their killing is justified? We have seen the same cycle happen for 73 years. The same cycle of violence has happened over and over and over. We see it in America as well, with Black Americans being shot in the street. This has to end. 73 years is too long. 100 years is too long. In a weird way, I'm privileged to live in the diaspora. Yes, that means I'm disconnected from my home, but that also means that I am not living under occupation and constant aggression. And because of that, it is my responsibility to educate people. It's my responsibility to my great-grandmother, to my grandfather, to my dad, to my aunts, my uncles, my cousins. It is my responsibility, and I know that a lot of other Palestinian Americans feel the same way. But that makes us easy targets. That means that if we are the only ones educating people about Palestine, that we will be blacklisted. We will be put on the Canary Mission. We will not be allowed back into the West Bank to see our family. That's why you all have to speak up. This can't fall on Palestinians anymore. Make it impossible for the US and Israel to silence us. No longer can we be reactive. We can't wait for these events to happen and then respond. We need to be proactive in our actions. Enough with justice postponed. We demand justice for Palestine. We demand justice for Black Americans. We demand justice for the indigenous populations all across the world that are subject to ethnic cleansing. End the ongoing American imperial project in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Africa. This is a political crisis that we're in, and it demands political solution. End the Nakba, end catastrophe for Palestinians. This cannot go on. Boycott Israeli products, divest from Israeli institutions, and sanction Israel. Palestine will not and cannot be free in isolation. We need you all. Thank you.
And lastly on the list of the sub-districts, we're not done yet, we have a lot of speakers. In Tulkarm district, 17 villages, 20,000 people displaced, and a recorded massacre. That's 804,000 people that were displaced between 1947 and 1949. I wish I could say all the names of the villages that make up the over 400 villages, but that was just a summation of them. Repeat. Netanyahu, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. Netanyahu, you can't hide. We charge you with genocide. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. We have our next speaker, please, Olivia.
All right, we're gonna do a new chant, so wait for me to tell you the whole thing and then join in, okay? It goes, no to annexation, no to occupation, yes to liberation, bring the whole thing down. No to annexation, no to occupation, yes to liberation, bring the whole thing down. No to annexation, no to occupation, yes to liberation, bring the whole thing down. One more, no to annexation, no to occupation, yes to liberation, bring the whole thing down. Yes, thank you. North America coordinator for the BDS movement, and I'll talk about that in a second. So we're here today to listen to stories of the Nakba, the catastrophe, which we know is ongoing. The ethnic cleansing of Palestine has never ended. I want to tell you some things you can do about it. How many of you are here at an action for Palestine for the first time ever? Can I see some hands? Amazing, welcome, thank you for being here. I think it's really great that there are so many people out here today. There are so many actions happening today across the United States. We have statements of solidarity from celebrities and politicians like never before. Our own Bosnian beast, Yusuf Nurkic, Portland Trailblazer, spoke out for Palestine. Thank you, Nurkic. But we also need more than just statements of solidarity. And actually, we need to put our solidarity into action. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. So BDS, for those who don't know, stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. It's a call from Palestinian civil society. Palestinians got together in Palestine in 2005 to issue this call for the international community. The BDS call is modeled off the South African anti-apartheid movement, and Palestinians are calling on us as the international community to boycott, divest from, and sanction Israel until Israel complies with international law by meeting 3 demands. Number 1 is ending the occupation and dismantling the illegal apartheid wall. Number 2 is full equality for Palestinian citizens of Israel. And number 3 is the right of return for Palestinian refugees. So these are the demands of the BDS call, and you can think of it like a picket line. For those of us who are familiar with the labor movement, we would never cross a picket line if workers there were on strike, until their demands were met. And you can think of BDS the same way. We don't cross the picket line. Why BDS is important is because it can take us from sympathy to action. It's very easy to say, we sympathize with the Palestinian cause, we're in solidarity with the Palestinian cause, but there is something you can actually do, and that's ending the complicity of our government and institutions right here at home. The United States gives $4 billion a year in military funding to Israel, no strings attached. Yes, and people say the BDS movement singles out Israel, which is like, yes, of course, because it's a call from Palestinians. Like, why would they not be calling on people to boycott Israel? But the United States is actually the one singling out Israel by giving them $4 billion a year in unconditional funding. So one way we can engage in BDS is to end this funding. So I want to give you all a link. You can either write it down, remember it. It is bit.ly, bit.ly/riseupwithpalestine, and the first letters of those words are capitalized. bit.ly/riseupwithpalestine. That will take you to an action page where you can urge our members of Congress to end U.S. military funding to Israel. And we can shout out Representative Earl Blumenauer, who signed on to Betty McCollum's legislation, which will condition some funding to Israel. So thank you, Earl. But he can be pushed a lot further to actually end U.S. military funding to Israel. And the rest of our congressional delegation here needs a huge push because a lot of them continue to demonize Palestinians in BDS. And they need to hear from you all because you elected them. They are supposed to represent us, and we do not want them to use our tax dollars on ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. At the city level here in Portland, our city has a $10 million contract with G4S for security guards right there at City Hall. G4S was recently just bought by Allied Universal, which G4S has a terrible reputation. They're complicit in a wide array of human rights violations all over the world, including detainment and transportation of undocumented immigrants here in the United States. And they used to do a lot of really messed up stuff in Palestine. They used to help run prisons and the military checkpoints and the apartheid wall. They actually got out of most of that thanks to BDS pressure, but they still partially own and operate the Israeli National Police Academy. So all the videos that are being shared right now of Israeli police and the Israeli border police throwing grenades into Palestinian homes, repressing protesters, protecting and encouraging settler violence, those police were trained at the G4S Police Academy, which is the same G4S that our tax dollars here in Portland pay to be at City Hall. So this is a demand that we can win locally to get our city to stop contracting with G4S. And there's actually a group of us who's working on a procurement policy to prevent the city from contracting with corporations who commit human rights abuses in Palestine and all over the world, like G4S. So email me at olivia@bdsmovement.net if you want to get involved in that, because that is a demand we can win right here in Portland. Another action we can take right here in Portland is ending the deadly exchange. The deadly exchange is a term coined by Jewish Voice for Peace that describes police exchanges between the United States police forces and Israeli police and military. Our own former police chief, Danielle Outlaw, I don't know who remembers her, she went on one of these exchange trips. And I don't know if you've seen what she's up to in Philly right now, but it involves a lot of tear gas. American police have always been brutal and racist. We know that. So I don't want to, feed into the trope that these trainings are causing American police to be brutal and racist, because they were brutal and racist long before Israel existed. But it does escalate and train them in certain tactics of surveillance, of racial profiling, of crowd control, of treating an entire civilian population as enemy combatants. That is what they're learning. These trainings are billed as counter-terror trainings, and those of us in the Arab and Muslim communities know what counter-terror means. It means surveil and violate our rights and brutalize us. So U.S. police learn these tactics from Israeli police and then come here and use them right here on our streets, especially at protests. And on these trips, they actually visit the Israeli National Police Academy that is owned and operated by G4S. So it is all connected. The Deadly Exchange is a BDS campaign we can take up in Portland. Durham, North Carolina had their city council passed a resolution to end these exchanges. Charlottesville, Virginia just passed a resolution to end these exchanges, and so there is no reason why we can't pass the same sort of resolution in Portland. There are a lot of other examples of BDS campaigns. I could talk about this for hours, but I will spare you. You can take them up in your university, your union, your church. Pillsbury is a target right now because they make Pillsbury products in the Ottawa Industrial Zone, which is an illegal settlement. Even members of the Pillsbury family have recently joined the call to boycott Pillsbury, which is incredible. Union members have divested their locals from complicit companies and Israeli bonds. Dock workers in San Francisco in the past have taken direct action by refusing to unload Israeli ships. Dock workers in Italy just yesterday actually refused to load weapons onto a ship that was headed to Israel. So one more thing I'll say about BDS is that, like so many movements for justice, collective action is so much more powerful than individual action. I see a lot of these lists going around that are like, a list of 100, 200 companies to boycott. And yes, that's fine. I personally don't buy any Israeli products and products from companies who are complicit in Israel. But more powerful than that is joining a collective action, picking a target and winning a boycott or a divestment campaign on an organizational or institutional level and holding our elected officials accountable with our tax dollars. Yeah! Those of us who have been doing BDS work, and especially Palestinians, are used to being attacked and blacklisted and demonized. And whether you're Palestinian, whether you've been doing this work for a while, or you're just now learning about Palestine, I know that it's easy to feel overwhelmed and frozen right now. But the tide is shifting so rapidly, the time to act is now. It is no longer possible to excuse apartheid and occupation. It is no longer possible for our elected leaders to quietly continue to fund ethnic cleansing. It is no longer possible to call yourself a progressive and defend an apartheid regime. And it is on all of us to help bring the whole thing down. No to annexation! No to occupation! Yes to liberation! Bring the whole thing down! No to annexation! No to occupation! Yes to liberation! Bring the whole thing down! No to annexation! No to occupation! Yes to liberation! Bring the whole thing down! Thank you!
Again? Again, who just said? Again, start it. Allahu Akbar. Takbir! Takbir! In the interest of the battery of our speaker, I'm gonna stop talking very much. Next speaker, Sireen. Sireen.
My name is Celine. I was born in a small village next to Haifa. My dad's family is from the 48 lands, a town next to Al-Fahim, Bak al-Gharbiyya, sharing a wall with Bak al-Sharqiyya in the West Bank. My maternal grandfather, also from Bak al-Gharbiyya, was forced to live in the West Bank, and he moved to Bak al-Sharqiyya, and because of that, his land was taken from him by the Israeli government within the Arab 48. To ensure the land wasn't lost to strangers, my family bought it. They bought their land back. But Israel killed my grandfather. Israel killed him. I have never met him. Do not forget about us. I am tired of seeing Arab Israeli on my passport. I want to see Palestinian from Palestine. We are here, we are proud. We come from Al-Fahim, we come from Ramallah, we come from Haifa, we come from Gaza, we come from Sheikh Jarrah, we come from every single corner. We come from stolen land. They hurt our families, they hurt our friends. Why are you blaming us for defending ourselves? Why are you blaming us for being mad? America, stand up. I want my Palestinian friends who have never seen Palestine to see their land. I want to see Palestine liberated in 2022. I am tired of me and my people begging for you to hear us. I have friends in Haifa who are sitting in their apartments, scared. I have cousins who are being shot at and arrested. Free Palestine, free all Palestinian prisoners. Give back all occupied land to Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon.
Crowd out here.
Our next speaker is Lema. Lema, please.
Hello everyone, this is Lema speaking. I'll keep this short and brief. I am a Palestinian refugee from Beersheba, South Palestine. Even though I was born and raised in Gaza, I was talking to my friends the other day and I was telling them how maybe when you move from Gaza to any part of the world, maybe you're going to be less anxious or less stressed when you see attacks on Palestine because you're not maybe physically there. But in fact, you get more anxious, you get more stressed because for myself, I still have all my friends, my mom, my dad, my two little sisters, my brother who are living right now in Gaza. Also my grandfather, who was 19 years old when he was kicked out of a Jemassine village next to Jaffa on the Mediterranean. My grandfather is older than the so-called state of Israel. My grandfather is 92, he's alive, he still tells his story until this day. I'll tell you guys a little story. On July 27th, 2014, I still remember this day because we had to leave our house and go to my uncle's house. We thought it might be a little safer. At 2 a.m. in the morning, we heard a huge explosion. We couldn't see anything because there was no electricity. And the next day we found out that it was their neighbor's house. At 2 a.m., we couldn't go back to sleep, and then we remembered it was my little sister's birthday. We went to the kitchen, we made her a small cake and some popcorn because we wanted her to remember that day. Only that day from the 53 days attack that happened in Palestine. We wanted that day to stick in her mind only. A few days ago, she's now 11, and I have another little sister who's 15. I called them a few nights ago. And I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? They were like, oh, we're doing some face masks, tomorrow's Eid. I was about to burst into tears, but then I was like, what in the resilience is that? People who don't know if they're gonna live until the next day are just trying to celebrate and live. They just want to be happy. When we go out to chant or protest, we say free Palestine because that's what we want to see. When they go out to protest, they say death to Arabs. If that doesn't tell you much about who's the oppressed and who's the oppressor, I don't know what else can. I know you guys are not waiting for someone to thank you for being here, but I do want to show my appreciation to everybody who showed up. Because right now, you're standing with Palestine, you're standing with Palestinians against colonialism, against land theft, against apartheid, against the genocide that's happening right now as we speak. Thank you guys for being here. Keep talking about it. Keep educating everybody around you. If a word does not change anything, they wouldn't have killed Ghassan Kanafani or Naji Ali. Please keep talking about it. Share it. Thank you so much.
All right, and our last speaker before we have we're gonna have some music going down. So, Sada O, you around? There we go.
President Joe Biden came out and spoke about the vaccine a few days ago. He was completely going to ignore what's happening in Palestine, and the only sentence he says that Israel has the right to defend themselves. He was not going to address this until someone in the audience asked him, what about Israel? What is happening in Israel right now? He just said that Israel has the right to defend themselves. Denying the massive killings, denying the violent dispossession, denying the bombs in Gaza. And people in Gaza right now, they declared emergency. They don't have clean water, no medical assistant of any form, nothing. He didn't mention the violent dispossessions of the family in Jerusalem, nothing about the Al-Aqsa Mosque, nothing. And yes, I'm not expecting much of a Biden administration, but there's something we can do. The least we can do is boycott Israel. We can support the BDS movement. Trust me, there's way many alternatives that, out there of those products that we use on our daily. There's so many alternatives. You can guys look it up. And there's this poem that is written by Rafif Ziadeh. She's a Palestinian-Canadian poet of human rights and activist. She wrote this beautiful poem, and I would like to share it with you guys. اسمحوا لي أن أتكلم اللسان العربي قبل أن يحتلوا لغتي أيضا. Allow me to speak my Arab tongue before they occupy my language as well. Allow me to speak my mother tongue before they colonize her memory as well. I am an Arab woman of color, and we come in all shades of anger. All my grandfather ever wanted to do was wake up at dawn and watch my grandmother kneel and pray in a village hidden between Jaffa and Haifa. My mother was born under an olive tree on a soil they say is no longer mine. But I will cross their barriers, their checkpoints, and their dumb apartheid walls and return to my homeland. I'm an Arab woman of color, and we come in all shades of anger. And did you hear my sister screaming yesterday as she gave birth at a checkpoint with Israeli soldiers looking between her legs for their next demographic threat, called her baby girl Janine? And did you hear Amni Muna screaming behind their prison bars as they tear-gassed her cell? We are returning to Palestine. I'm an Arab woman of color, and we come in all shades of anger. But you tell me this womb inside of me will only bring your next terrorist? Beard-wearing, gun-waving, towel-hat, sad nigger? You tell me I send my children out to die, but those are your copters and your F-16s in their heads, lynching black people. I'm an Arab woman of color and we come in all shades of anger. So who is that woman screaming in a demonstration? Sorry, should I not scream? I forgot to be your every Orientalist dream, genie in a bottle, belly dancer, harem goer, soft-spoken Arab woman. Yes, master, no master. Thank you for the peanut butter sandwiches raining down on us from your F-16, master. Yes, my liberators are here to kill my children and call them collateral damage. I am an Arab woman of color and we come in all shades of anger. So let me just tell you, this womb inside of me will only bring you your next rebel. She will have a rock in one hand and a Palestinian flag in the other. She will have a rock in one hand and a Palestinian flag in the other. I'm an Arab woman of color and we come in all shades of anger, so beware. Beware my anger. Not a penny, not a dollar. We will not pay for any of this slaughter. Not a penny, not a dollar. No more. Thank you. Free Palestine.
Today you heard about the numbers of our loss, but more importantly, you heard from Palestinians who shared their truth with you. I want you to think about how every one of those over 800,000 Palestinians that were displaced or murdered in 1948, every one of the ones displaced or murdered before 1948, and every one of the millions of Palestinians that exist in Palestine today and are facing displacement or violence are Palestinians like the one standing before you. We are not just numbers, and we are definitely not a side in a conflict. We are a people with an extraordinarily long and rich connection to the land, an indigenous connection of ancestral wisdom and tradition and historical continuity that have been brutally oppressed and subject to a program of erasure. We are an ancient people who continue to experience ethnic cleansing so that a manufactured state can exist and carry out contemporary imperialism. A state that's existential fabric is occupation. An ongoing occupation that is being resisted in every corner of Palestine. Palestine will be liberated from within by Palestinians who decolonize by any means necessary. Palestine can only be liberated from within. And the occupation state can only be deflated from without. It is our obligation to starve the occupation of its imperialist, capitalist fuel. You have one action that is in your hands. If you wish to support Palestinians to be free, then do your part, the part only you can do from here. Boycott the financial backers of the criminalist Zionist occupation. Force the divestment on a local and national level from the financial backers of the criminalist Zionist occupation. Demand sanctions against the criminalist Zionist occupation and the criminals who collaborate with it. It is only when we isolate the criminal Zionist occupation state, when we remove the basis of its unchecked and disproportionate power, will we see Palestine be free. Do not be fooled by the language of sides and conflicts. The Palestinian people, without an army, has resisted the occupation at the hands of the world's most advanced and financially supported militant abusers on the planet for over 100 years. The only thing they want and need is for you to stop supporting their abuser. To simply withhold the dollar so that they can hold on to their land and their homes and their lives. Thank you to everybody. The speaking program is over. If you so feel motivated to donate some money, if you had any food, it is going directly to a family in Gaza who lost their entire livelihood, home, building, and it's going to be a pool of funding to help other people get back on their feet and distribute in the community. Some people here are going to be putting some music on, I hope. Thank you for coming through. Talk to your fellow Palestinians and people in the crowd. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining, everybody. So we're going to hang around for a minute and see about some music. Performance. Let's give you a better view. And I do have a camera. I like to take screenshots of the screen instead. So once again, we're at Schrunk Plaza, downtown Portland, right across from City Hall. That's the IRS building behind me there. One of my first Portland protests was here almost 20 years ago. Because the U.S. was invading Iraq. City Hall there. We'll take a little walk here in a second. Not far from somewhere that might be more familiar to some of you.
Palestinians have the right to return, so human rights violations stop occurring, so that the entire occupation stops strangling Palestinian livelihood. I appreciate everyone turning out today, and I think people should be listening to Palestinian voices. They're being silenced on Instagram. Look at Sheikh.
Yeah, I'm not wearing my badge.
Being bombarded in another campaign. Put your eyes on Palestinian journalists and Instagram live.
Oh, thank you.
They show the truth that we cannot be silenced.
Yep. Oh, there it is. Right there.
One second. by somebody.
This guy's getting hounded. Nice trees around here too. Back during one of those earlier protests, I climbed up one of these. I was able to take some pictures. Some people were wondering if there was going to be a march around after this, and I think unless something spontaneous pops up, probably not.
I got it.
Take a little walk around. Right across from the Justice Center here. People don't come over here too much during like the protests, or they didn't last summer because this is federal property. And hilariously, both PPB and the federal officers like poke out of these hidey holes because they get these secret tunnels that go to the park behind me here. So there's like feds walking under us right now. Hey, how's it going?
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. Got Adam Costello here.
Hello.
You streaming today?
No, I was kind of late. So I just kind of took it in, took some pictures. So
it's kind of nice to just, be present, right?
I hate that I can't watch party anymore because I tried to watch party you and it won't let me.
Oh, Facebook got rid of that feature, right?
It's stupid because it was really convenient.
What could you do now? Jeez.
You can just share the post, but it's harder to get people to actually engage with it when it's just like a share.
Well, you can restream me, run your own crowd stream type thing. I'm going to be doing some tutorial videos on how to do all that stuff with OBS soon. So people can see how I do this kind of streaming, but also, the restreaming and how to do things like rip streams from people who are going to delete them right away.
It's so nice today.
All right, y'all. I'm gonna enjoy the beautiful weather, and we will see you again soon. Maybe sooner than you think, but definitely tomorrow for JFPK. See you then at 11 o'clock. Peace and love.